Aloha and welcome to this brief screencast on branching and merging and the use of GitHub Desktop to do it and why it's awesome. So what is branching and merging? You might have noticed when you create a repo in GitHub, there's this idea that you're working in master. What's that about? Well, what that means is that when a repo is created in GitHub, it's always created with a single default branch called master. But you're not limited to working in just that branch. You can create additional branches, and then the work in those branches is isolated from any other branches unless you do a merge. And a merge is basically taking the contents of one branch and moving those changes into another branch. So this is an extremely powerful way to coordinate development, and there's a zillion different kind of workflows that you can create with branching and merging. I'm going to talk in this screencast about a very simple one, which is nonetheless quite powerful and more than adequate really for the situations that you'll find yourself in this class. So let me try to give you kind of a graphical idea of branching and merging. Let's say we start with our master branch and we make a couple commits, we make another commit, and then we decide, you know, it'd be good to do some work in another branch because we don't want to affect what's happening in the master branch. So we create a new branch called B1, and when we create that branch, it's going to be identically equal to the contents of the master branch at the point where we created that branch from master. And now we can go off and we can do more work in master, but the contents of B1 is not affected. Here's more work in master. Then we do some additional work in the branch, and that could be different and is isolated from the commits that are being made to master. So there's some more commits in master, more commits in the branch, more commits in master. Then we merge the contents of the branch back into master, which makes those two identically equal, and then we continue on and do more work in the master. Okay, so here's two branches, a master branch and a branch called B1, and we can do work in each of them, and we can branch from one, merge back into it. Okay, so in this class, our approach is going to be to say that the master branch is, I like to call it the golden branch. It's the branch where if you run the program, the code that's contained in the golden branch, that should be working solid, you know, as bug-free as you can make it. On the other hand, you'll create a lot of other branches during a project development experience, and those other branches that are not the master branch are going to represent works in progress. That could be buggy stuff, it could be experiments that you're trying out that you want to, you know, break things or modify things, you're not sure what's happening, or you've got some new enhancement that you need to develop, and it's going to take you a while to do it. So you do it in a branch, and only when it's complete do you merge that experimental branch back into master, so that the master branch, everything in there, each commit represents a working version of the system. So you can create branches for a couple of reasons. When you're working alone, as you'll see, a branch is really nice because it enables you to try something out by making a branch from master, and then if you don't like what you did, you can always just switch back to the master branch, and all of that work in your experimental branch is still there, but your code base in the master branch is unaffected by it. So it enables you to try things out and quickly kind of revert back to a previous state of your system very easily. When you're working with other people, it's even more useful to have branches because it enables people to work in their own branch, and they can break things and mess up and everything, and all of those problems are isolated from everybody else. So there's this idea of publishing because, as you recall with GitHub and Git, you work in a local repo, but there's also a repo over at GitHub. And so when you first create a branch in GitHub Desktop, that branch only exists in your local repo. So you publish it, which is you'll see the little button in GitHub Desktop. Publishing basically means, okay, I've created this branch locally, now I want that branch and its contents to also exist over on GitHub. And my recommendation for this class the workflow you want to follow is you always publish your branch. You always try to keep GitHub and your local workspace in sync as much as possible. It's not a requirement of Git that you do that, but it simplifies a lot of problems. You avoid a lot of potential difficulties by just always trying to keep things synchronized as much as possible. So there's two situations. We talked about branching. There's two situations when you want to merge in this class. And they're kind of interesting. The first one is the obvious one. You finish your work in a branch, and then you want to move it into master because you've updated the system. You now have new functionality, and you want the master branch to reflect it. So you're merging into master from a branch. On the other hand, there are situations where you are working in a branch and master is being updated, and you want to get those updates from master because you want to have your branch reflect the latest version of the golden system. So this is a merge the other direction. It's a merge into a branch from master. All right, let's try to show how this works. We're in our master, and then we create a branch, and we start work, and then there's more commits to master, and then we're working in our branch, and now we decide, it'd be really nice if we could see in our branch those two commits that got made to master. So we merge from master into the branch, okay? And then there's more commits made to master, and we move along. And now we say, you know what, there's two commits to master. I'd like to see those commits in my branch to make sure that my branch is up to date with the latest version of the master branch of the system. So I do another merge from master into my branch. We work a little while longer. I get finished with whatever I'm doing. I merge it back into master. Now master reflects the contents of my branch, and development continues. Okay, so that's the brief overview of branching and merging. Graphically, let's see how we actually do it in GitHub Desktop. So let's create a new repository. We'll call this branch test. Public, we'll initialize it with a README, create the repo, and then we'll open it in desktop. I'm going to put it into my local path, put it into Philip M. Johnson in GitHub, and we'll clone. Okay, so now we've got our repo called branch test. You notice the current branch is master. And so let's just create a little IntelliJ project that we can use to see what's going on. Okay, there's our branch test. And let's create a file called master.txt, representing some work we're doing in master. And so we're going to add this to Git. So master, some work in the master branch. And if we go look now at GitHub Desktop, we can see, let's also, because I just really dislike having the IntelliJ stuff in there, so I'll create a .git ignore file, and I'll put starml.idea in there. And now if we go here, if we go back to GitHub Desktop, we can see we've got a git ignore, we've got our master.txt file. So let's say initial work in master. Okay, so now we've committed to our local branch. I'm going to push to origin, which means now if we go to the origin, which is our branch test repo, we can see we've got that master.txt in our master branch. All right, now here let's make things fun. So let's create a new branch, and we'll call this, I don't want to call it branch 1, but experiment 1. We'll call it experiment 1. I'm going to create a branch. Okay, so now all our work that will be done is now going to be done in the experiment branch, okay? Because when we create a branch, we switch to that branch by default. So for example, I can now create a new file called experiment1.text. This is my experiment. I save that out, and if I go here, you can see in my branch experiment 1, there's this experiment 1 text. So we can say, starting experiment. So we'll commit to experiment 1. And now what we're going to do, see again, all of this stuff so far has been in our local repo. GitHub doesn't know anything about it. In fact, if we go back to GitHub, we can see branch master. There's only one branch there. So we want to keep things in sync between GitHub and our local repo. So let's press this publish branch button. And this is going to push this branch to GitHub. So now if we go back to GitHub and we refresh, okay, we can say, hey, we've got a branch called experiment 1. Now we can see in our master branch, we've got this master.txt file. And if we switch to the experiment branch, we've got our additional experiment file, okay, in that branch. And this is how at GitHub you can switch back and forth between branches. Similarly, I'm sitting here in the, if you look down at the lower right-hand corner, IntelliJ will tell you which branch we're in. We're in the experiment 1 branch. I can go to GitHub Desktop and switch back to the master branch. And if I go back to IntelliJ IDEA, you can see now I'm in the master branch and my experiment file is no longer there. Okay? Word to the wise, whenever you're switching back and forth between branches, make sure to commit your changes to a branch before you switch away from it. Otherwise, bad things happen. This is something you just learn through, painful experience with GitHub, but with Git, I'll just kind of warn you in advance. Okay, so here we are in our in which branch we're in. We're in the master branch. Let's switch. Let's say that we wanted the master branch. Let's say we finished working on our experiment 1, and we say we want to merge into the master branch the contents of experiment 1. Okay, so we in GitHub Desktop, we select the master branch, and then in this branch menu, we're going to merge into the current branch. So we're going to merge, our current branch is master. We're going to merge into the current branch the experiment 1 branch. Okay, so let's merge into master, and then we can now push this to GitHub. Okay, and what's just happened? Well, if we go look locally, now our master branch in our local repo contains what was in the experimental branch. We've now got that experiment 1 file. And in fact, if we go back to GitHub and we refresh, we can now see that the master branch in GitHub contains the work that we did in the experimental branch. And we can go back to the experiment branch and we can see that branch still exists. We can in fact do work in either of these directories and merge back and forth. So just for fun, let's go back. We're in the master branch. Let's go to master.txt. Let's actually make things easy. Let's create a new file called master2.txt. So this is more work in master branch. And we can save that out, and then we can go to GitHub Desktop. We're in the master branch. There's this new work in master. So more work in master. We can commit that locally, push it to the origin. Okay, so that GitHub now actually has that change. And now let's move back to experiment 1. And we move back to that experiment 1, we can see that we don't have that additional work in master. Okay, but let's say that we wanted it. All right, well, that's very easy to do. We can be in GitHub Desktop. We're in the experiment 1 branch. We're in the branch that we want to merge into. And we can merge into current branch the master branch. Okay, so we can say merge into experiment 1, and then even before we push to origin, we can go back to here and we can see now that our experiment branch contains the more recent work that we did in master. We always want the GitHub repo to reflect, to be synchronized with our local work so we can do a push origin. And once we've done that, then you can see, if we go to GitHub, that the experiment1 branch, if I refresh, now contains the updated work from the master branch. Okay? So branching and merging is not complicated. You create a branch in GitHub Desktop. That new branch, by doing new branch, that branch will exist locally until you actually publish it by pressing, so again, just to review, we create a new branch. We'll call this experiment 2, and we're going to base it on master. We could even base it on experiment 1. It doesn't matter, but let's base it on master. Okay, now that branch exists locally. To make it also exist at GitHub, we press the publish button. Okay, and then we can see at GitHub, if we refresh, we can now see there's an experiment 1, experiment 2, and master branch. And then going back to GitHub, whenever we want to update one branch with the contents of another one, we simply select the branch that we care about, and then we're going to update that branch or merge into this branch the contents of some other branch, and we just select it this way. All right, so that's how you do basic branching and merging with GitHub Desktop. You can do it at the command line, but I don't know, man. For me, this is a much less error-prone way of doing things. The key thing I want to emphasize again is always commit your changes before fiddling with branches, before moving back and forth. Commit your changes. Always publish your changes to GitHub. That way, if something crazy happens locally, you're covered, and you can always go to GitHub and find the things that you did. All right, that's it. Happy branching and merging.